Hello guys, this is Sol from Salt and Pepper and welcome to a new tutorial, this time for Substance Painter for the very beginning, basically when you opened your Substance Painter your first time and you want to texture a mesh. So let's go through the surface first. Basically what you see, the UI, is when you open the new Substance, it looks like this. This is now the Adobe version of Substance. I'm not sure if they go by number, but this is now after algorithmic. And the materials are now lined up on the left side. They used to be in the bottom. If you want to change that, you basically just click on the top and move your window to the bottom so you have it aligned as it was before. If you want to reset it, you just go to window, reset UI, and it will jump right back. I prefer it here. So when we're going to import a mesh, we can throw the material onto it. You have all the settings in here. We will go through them when I open a mesh. Make sure you use FBX format for the meshes to import. You can import OBJs as well, but they tend to give, at least for me, they usually give me a lot of issues with the camera, with the panning around. So I definitely prefer the FBX, and it's much less hassle, especially for SL setup. So we go to File and we click to New. You will not want to open or anything, you just want a new file, no import or anything. And you select, the template remains, you select the file, and I'm going to go with the low dress. The resolution will stay at 2048, and we need the normal map for Second Life to be set to OpenGL. This is important. The rest you can leave as is for now. The UV tile workflow is important for the skin makers and for the tattoo makers that you will use for the bodies when you have a lot of overlapping UVs, or not overlapping, but basically in one tile, like the torso in one tile, the lower body in one tile. I will go through this in the next tutorial. For now, we're going to use the regular setup. And we just click OK. So the dress appears. This is my low poly dress with just the main folds modeled in. You see a metal chain. I have two materials applied. You can see them on the right side now. One is called dress. If I click on the metals, you will see the UV for the metal chain on top. Then we have our layers and our texture settings. In the layers, we just have a plain layer by default. It's just empty. We can also remove it. It's just not needed. Texture settings, and in the properties later, you will see different settings for the material we are going to use. Before we paint or before we drop any kind of material, we have to bake the maps. So Substance will know where to take the information from to put into the texture that will appear on your mesh. Therefore, we go under texture settings and scroll down, and you will have the bake mesh button, and you can see the different maps that will be baked. And so we click that. Here again, we're just going to go through the very basic settings. There are much more detailed settings where you can tick and untick things that you later on might not need. But for now, just to get a basic grasp for Substance, we're going to set this to 248. You can change this later as well. I will export as 124 later on, but I like to work in a bigger setting. You just get more detail. And if you shrink the detail down later on, it will be still more detail in the smaller file than when if you would be working on a smaller file right away. So in this case, I will show you the difference if we don't have high poly mesh. So we will use the same low poly mesh here. I do have a high poly, I'll show you later, but how it would bake if you have a piece of furniture or anything that you just are happy with the low poly as it is, then you leave everything as it is here as well. For the anti-aliasing, you set 4x4. This might result in the bake taking a little bit longer, but it will be worth it because you get more clear edges and a smoother frame of it basically. And we will match by always. You can also match by name, but for now also we will keep this as default. Everything else remains as it is already set. And we just click bake selected textures and wait a moment. This is pretty quick as this is a low poly mesh and there's no much info to bake. So it's going pretty quick. And then we click OK. Now the very first thing that you do is save your file. So we're going to File, Save As. We're going to give it a name. We're going to go to this folder and call it Dress Substance Low. Okay, so when we will have autosave enabled and everything, it will just save in there as well. So make sure you save your files because losing this is no fun. Okay, so we have it baked and you see already the shadows are showing. Let's go back to the dress. What you also see is that my back looks darker than my front. I also made a previous tutorial with using the Baked Lightning filter where I show you how to use a method specifically for Second Life where you can bake in your lights so you can control them better and export this as your diffuse later. But in this tutorial now I'm going to show you how to work with the 2D view in Substance. That's just a different workflow. Both methods work absolutely fine for Second Life. You just have to find whatever works better for you. And I personally switch back and forth depending also on the mesh and on the detail I want to make. So for this one we're going to go with a 2D view method. Here in these 4 icons you can set your environment. Right now we have set the panorama. Let me show you the environments we have in here. Substance gives you by default a lot of materials and smart materials and masks and different filters and different brushes, alphas and different textures. And the last one here, the last icon, are our environments. Basically imagine it like a big globe around the dress that shows you, in fact I can show you the environment here because I have it off. Where is it? Environment opacity here. So basically my environment is there. I usually just set it to black because for me it's easier to understand what's going on just for the eye. I don't like to have it there because it's not going to export out or anything. It's just for the viewport here. So right now the panorama here is that what is set by default. You see I have 2 other panoramas next to it. Those are already custom made and there's a pretty great tutorial. I will link you down below where you can see how to make those custom environments, because the thing in Substance is that for this panorama you see your light is only in the front and you can rotate it, but if we rotate the environment I can lit the back but then the front is all dark, and getting something that is lit from both sides is almost impossible because this is not made. Usually for the PBR rendering you would just simulate this. Basically your texture would be flat and the render machine in the game would actually create this effect. In Second Life, we don't have that. So we need a workaround, and we basically fake the lights. So we want them to appear already in the UV, in the texture. This is why we will export the 2D view, and the plain diffuse is not so interesting for us. But this is very Second Life specific, not for different games. So yeah, in this case, I'm changing to the panorama. I have one that I call multi-light. You see now everything is lit pretty bright actually. So I'm going to just go down in the exposure a little bit so it's not that bright. But you see, even if I rotate it now, it still moves, but the light itself is pretty much even. So I will place it in a way I like the reflection to show, like this, and we're good to go with the lighting. So later when we export this, we will have a smooth lighting all over. So basically now you can just throw a material on your dress. We can see, let's put the texture set list. We have the dress and the metals here, and now the one that is clicked is the one that is active in the middle part. We go back to our materials. I'm going to type in, let's say silk, and just pick one. We're gonna pick this one now, and drag and drop it over. So you see this already has some texture to it, and you already see basically a 3D effect in the texture itself, because it already, that's what's in the material. This is where Substance get really strong, because just creating such an effect in Photoshop just takes forever. It's not impossible, but you see that also the lights and everything, it's just, it gets a very realistic look with just a few steps without much even done to it. Now if I click on the satin, I can change the scale. Let's set this to 2, and you see it's like finer. Also, let's say I don't want it in horizontal direction, but for some reason I want it in a vertical direction. I just turn it. If you hold shift, it will snap into the 90 degrees angle, or you can also rotate down here. You can change your offset if you have some kind of pattern in there or whatever you need. You can play around with those settings. Just gonna go back to 90 degrees. And yeah, let's say we can also change the colors. So the base color is set to green here, and let's say we want to change this to more of a mint color, something like this. Just click to the side. Okay, now let's say we also want a little bit less roughness, so it's not actually more roughness, so it's not that shiny. You see, if I change the roughness, I get a different shine effect. The metallic gives a more metallic effect, like if you put that up so it really looks like there's a metallic shine to it. You play around until you just have something that you like. The color variation, these settings depend actually on the material that you pick, because every material will have its own settings that you can change. Some have patterns in them, some have whatever. Oh, I have like presets in here, like fine gray, artichoke, olive, camel. Oh, this camel is nice too. I like the a bit more mint better. So we're gonna go back here, not as bright. Something like this, just for now to play around with. It's really just to understand how the fabric works. Now, before we're gonna go deeper into detail, I want to show you how it will look if we're going to bake a high poly model onto it. So if you have something that has more folds and you have your game ready mesh, but you want more details into it, and you made a high poly in ZBrush or in any other program wherever you make your high poly, you just bake it again. I'm gonna go to bake the maps. We tick off the low poly and then we select the high poly that we will pull into here so it knows what will be applied. We leave everything as we had before and just bake it again. It will take slightly longer because it has obviously more information now. And you see it's already happening here, but we have much more ruffles that I modeled into the high poly. And you see we have much more details in the dress that show as if they would be completely in 3D, but they're actually baked into the actual texture. Now we're going to add second material just to layer something on top, and I show you the how you work with masks. So you can cut out pieces and just layer things as you wish. We're going to delete the empty layer. What we have here is this icon here applies fill layer that we can basically also draw on, and in a non-destructive way if we use a mask. So we click that, it will add a fill layer. It fills with the default color, and it also fills with metal roughness, normal, and height information. You can tick those off and you see it will gather or basically show the information that we had before. It just changes the color, but everything else in Shine remains. But in this case, I'm going to leave them all on and just right click and add a black mask. Black means it's not showing, white means it's showing. So in the mask, we draw black or white only, and we will adjust everything else in the fill layer itself. So let's say I'm going to select a brush. We need to delete our silk that we used before and select something that, let's use the dots here. And you can draw either on the model itself or on the UV. Like if we draw on the model itself, we just, let me see, the brush needs to be set to white because we draw on a black mask. So we're just gonna go and put a few dots so it reveals, the mask basically reveals the texture of this fill layer. Wherever we put these. I'm not trying to make it look nice for now, I'm just trying to show you how the technique itself works, so you can use it in any way you wish. So we revealed just a few spots basically of the fill layer. And let's say we want it to be in a different color, so we just go to the base color down below and we move our slider to, let's say, something pretty bright red. Click somewhere else. Now this is just a single color that is applied here, which still looks pretty flat. What we can do now, since it also has height information, we scroll down to our height, and now if we move this to the right, you see already how it changes if it's moved to the right to the fullest, it looks like sprayed paint or blood or whatever on top. If we move it to the other side, the slider, it will be more like embossed holes, and it looks like the fabric is ripped there and the red color lays below. Now, don't take everything for real as it's shown in the substance viewport, because unfortunately this here is not the quality we're going to see in Second Life. We don't have PBR. The render machine is a little bit different, so we have to fake this look. What you will see though is what you see in this 2D view. So even if you zoom in here, you do see that there's already a 3D effect in there because we gave it some height information. So this actually we can export, and we can also use a normal map to intensify and to enhance this kind of effect. But this is already like this, you will be able to show without materials on your mesh within Second Life. So let's say we also want another material somewhere in between there. Let's find something that has structure. Maybe we have a leather pattern. It doesn't really match. I'm just showing you the technique. It's like a quilt, and we're going to change the scale of the quilt to 4 so we can actually see something. And let's say I'm gonna give this a black mask. And now we can select on the mask. This is also something important to see. You can use the selection tool, which is the 4th tool here from the top, and you can choose between selecting triangles, squares, the mesh, or UV island. So when we select triangles, I zoom in, here's the UV. I can click click to here. See, it selects triangles when you drag across. When you select squares, you can select the full square, so it will show only there. You can select here the full island, so it's very easy to select an island, or you can select the whole mesh. If you have multiple meshes in there, it will select only one, obviously. So we're going to go back to the islands and deselect them, because I don't want either of these selections. In fact, I want to paint something in, so I use the brush. We're still on the alpha mask. I will select a different brush now that will some different stroke, just so you see the difference. We use the dirt splash here, and I'm going to, is it set to white? Yes. So I'm just going to give it on certain areas. You see it's already affecting the side here because I have it not set to actually draw on the texture. The settings I have on the brush is to draw on the mesh itself. It does work on both, but you get a cleaner result if you want to draw on the UV itself. You scroll down here. Let's make this a little bit higher. And we will set the alignment to UV and to texture. So this way, if I draw across here, I only get the actual UV, and you see it stops at the seam here. If I have the object selected, nothing happens here, but I can draw across the seam on the 3D object. And I would also have the, you can have the tangent warp here, wrap, not warp, and come across here, but it's just not going to give you as clean results in my opinion. So this is what I use to draw on the actual model, so you basically see what you're doing. And you can draw on here, and you see the red stays on top because my layer is on top. I could put it below, then it would basically cover the red, and if I don't want the red on here, I would remove it also with a mask. But in this case, we'll leave it this way. And we're going to change the color of the quilt to something more creamy, and we're also going to change the layer to a soft light. The layer here are basically like in Photoshop, so you can change different adjustments and make different effects with that. And I'm going to lower it a little bit so it's not that much. Okay. See, so there's like something quilted, padded. You still see the structure of the fabric below because it takes that information, but the quilt itself has a dull light information, so to speak. There's a much less roughness. I could adjust that if I would love more shine on that area, so I would go back to the leather settings and go into the roughness and see, like if I go down here, see I get more shininess in that part. Also, I could say let's just not use the roughness channel at all, so it will take the information from the material below. So if I click that off, it has the silk shining from below. Also the metal, and if I take the height off, you see it's completely gone. You see that where the texture was, but the actual height information was in the quilt. So okay, and now we can also add something for the metals. We're going to go back to our materials and search for a gold. I'm going to use a plain gold, drag and drop it in here. And you see, this looks already pretty shiny and pretty even. But let's say I do not want it this even. I want every second link to be in some kind of different pattern. So we're going to put this one on top, and we will scale it a little bit so we see what's going on there. So it looks like a weathered something. That's a pretty cool material actually, but we want it only on every second link. So we're going to right click and give it a black mask, and now we're going to use the selection tool and use by UV islands. And we can select either again from the UV map or from the actual 3D model. And I'm just going to, it has to be set to white because I have a black mask. I'm just going to drag across the links that I want to be in the other material. Here we selected want too much. So the non-destructive way is nice because it just can go back and just mask it the way you want it. So if you click on the material itself, the UV disappears, and you see we have a chain with different effects there. Also, let's say I want in the dress, I also had a little piping that I already cut in the UV because I knew I would want this to be a different color. And I'm just going to mask my base fabric and select the dress again. You see the top already shows white because there's no material on it. I'm going to duplicate or copy paste, Control C, Control V the material, but I'm going to invert the mask. You can right click into it and then invert the mask. So now the dress is deselected and only the piping is selected, and we can change the color here to, let's say, something black. So you see the difference here. See, and now I have a clean piping or strip or whatever, and you see actually the material itself continues in the same way because we duplicated the layer. Now I also could say I want it to look a little bit different or even be a completely different material, but I will just change the scale and set it to something like 6 or even 8. So it's like a fine rib. That's too much. 7. No, something like this. See, so even the texture itself looks a little bit different. So this is basically, you see, the limit is your creativity, really. You can drag and drop materials and paint into the layers and use masks and change the entire look of your mesh until you like what you see in here. And finally, you will export these textures, and I'm going to show you how to set up a custom export for textures and the materials you would want for Second Life. So when we want to export, we go to File, Export Textures, and you will see the actual materials that you have in here. Sometimes you would want maybe only one, so you can tick off the other. We will leave them both selected for now. You will select a file where you, a folder where you want your files to go to. I'm going to select the image folder in here, and this is where we're going to set up our preset, because you could choose the 2D view. This is basically what you would see in here, but we want more than that. And the 2D view by default is either standalone, and you can export that plus other maps, but you will always have tons of maps that you don't need for Second Life. So a custom setup is the easiest thing to do here. We will base it on PNG for the export. The size I'm going to export in already in 1024. If you have something very detailed like tattoo or skin or something, you probably would export it in a bigger version and then shrink it down later in Photoshop if you want to do something with it, or even if your final texture is in Substance and you will use it as is for Second Life, you can export in 2048, but Second Life will shrink it down anyway. Sometimes the way Second Life shrink it results in a more blurry version, so that's why I usually shrink it down myself, because the quality remains better. But I realized for some different kind of, be it tattoos or some kind of delicate lace, sometimes it helps to have it set to 2048 and then upload it with just that, and let Second Life basically shrink it. The padding we can leave as it is set, and now we're going to go to output templates. And this may be a little bit overwhelming in the beginning, but it's actually not that difficult. So here you can see the presets that come with Substance Painter by default, but most of them have a bunch of stuff that we really don't need. My personal ones that I made is SL and SL curvature. This is the textures I use, like specular, 2D view, roughness, normals, AOs. Nowadays I rarely use them, but I just export them just to have them, because in some rare cases I need them. And the diffuse is important if you export the baked lightning filter, because that might be different from the 2D view. So then sometimes you would need both. For now, we're gonna create a new preset. Right click and rename it SL new for now. And now we're just going to add the textures that we need. We need them all from the RGB channels. So we'll click just that. We will name it first, whatever we want it to be. The $sign here gives you a macro that will rename your textures on export with the name you gave it. So basically when you click here and choose the mesh underscore and texture set, and the first will be, we name it the 2D view. So when your texture will be exported, it will be your mesh name, then it will say, for example, Lambert 7 dress, it will be here, and then it will say 2D view, so you will know which map that actually is. It will export in PNG. And now we need to tell Substance where to get the information, what kind of map we need to export. This would be the 2D view. We find it here and just drag and drop it into the RGB channel from RGB. And that's it. This is how your 2D view will be exported. Now we're going to add a normal map. So again, we rename first and put mesh, then texture. This is really up to you how you want the presets here to be named. Just name it something, you can find it later. And we want normal map. Then we're going to use another important thing for Second Life, we will need OpenGL, not the DirectX. So you put the normal also from the RGB channels. So this is the main textures you will need. Sometimes you will need the roughness map to invert to generate a specular map for Second Life. So we're going to use mesh, the RGB we don't need here, underscore texture underscore roughness. And the roughness is here, and just drag it. This is a gray channel because roughness is from black to white in gray tones. And then we need the spec. I like to export that for colorful spec maps. That can be very interesting. Again, this is something depends on your own workflow, what you want to add in your materials. Texture set, and we're gonna drop the specular from RGB channel, so it will be a colorful specular map. Let's put the AO just to put it so you see how it will look. RGB mesh texture. That was a specular, I forgot to name it. AO, and for the AO we're going to use the regular ambient occlusion from the gray channel. That's it. Okay, so we have those saved, and this preset will now show up in your settings, so we can select it from here and just scroll down. This is the last one we had. Next time it will be in alphabetical order when you reopen Substance. And then just click export. You see all the textures I exported and renamed in dress slow. That was how my mesh was named, Lambert 7 dress, and the 2D view, so we know what it is. And those will be your textures you can use to either make colors or to upload already directly. Now there's some make their colors in Substance. I prefer to make them in Photoshop. There's really no right way to do that. You just use whatever you're more comfortable with. You can change the colors very quickly in Substance. But sometimes you have an assortment of colors saved in Photoshop, or you save them in Substance as well and import them in here. All possible. That is already up to you how you want to export. So this is the very, very beginning, and I hope that helped.